The night was quiet, but a strange heaviness hung in the air. The news had just spread across the world. Robin Williams, the man who had made millions laugh and cry with equal force, was gone. People everywhere sat in silence, staring at their television screens, their phones, their radios, unable to believe that the man whose smile seemed endless had carried so much pain inside. It was as if the laughter of the world had suddenly dimmed. Keanu Reeves was in his apartment when he heard. He sat still for a long time, unable to move, his eyes fixed on the floor. Robin had been more than an actor to him. Years earlier, when Keanu was struggling with deep grief after the loss of his best friend and then his partner, Robin was one of the rare people who quietly reached out. There had been no cameras, no publicity, no headlines. Just Robin calling him one late night, speaking with warmth, reminding him that even in the darkest corners, kindness still lived. Keanu remembered how Robin had said in that soft voice, "Pain is heavy, but laughter can sometimes hold it for you, even just for a while." That moment had stayed with him forever, and now, knowing Robin's own pain had taken him away, Keanu felt both crushed and determined. He whispered into the empty room, "I won't let your light go, Robin, I promise." Days later, the world gathered to mourn Robin. Social media, flooded with memories, strangers shared how his movies had saved them during their worst nights, and friends recalled his quiet acts of generosity. But beyond the public grief, there was a private determination forming inside Keanu. He decided that if Robin had carried others in silence, then he, too, must carry something forward. A charity event was organized in Robin's memory. Famous stars filled the hall, cameras flashed, and speeches poured out. But when Keanu walked to the stage, there was a stillness. He wasn't known for grand words or big gestures. His humility often made him seem invisible among louder voices. But that night, his presence was different. He stood there quietly for a moment, his eyes soft, his hands loosely holding the microphone. "Robin gave us laughter," Keanu began, his voice calm but heavy with feeling. "But more than that, he gave us humanity. When I was broken, he reached out without anyone knowing. He didn't want recognition, he just wanted to help. That is what true kindness is. It is not about being seen, it is about seeing someone who cannot stand, and choosing to stand with them." The hall grew quiet. People leaned forward, drawn not by the volume of his voice, but by the weight of his truth. Even those who had never known Robin personally felt the echo of his kindness through Keanu's words. Then Keanu did something no one expected. Instead of speaking longer, he stepped down from the stage and walked into the crowd. He sat beside a young boy in a wheelchair who had been brought to the event. The boy's mother looked startled, but Keanu smiled gently, placed his hand on the boy's shoulder, and said, "You are part of Robin's light too. He made the world laugh so we could keep living. Promise me you'll keep laughing, even when it's hard." The cameras clicked, but Keanu didn't look at them. His attention stayed with the boy. The hall erupted in quiet tears, not because of the words, but because of the humility in his act. Robin had once inspired the world by giving pieces of his heart away, and now Keanu was continuing that legacy, not through fame, but through simple human connection. But as the event ended and people left with softened hearts, not everyone was comfortable with Keanu's quiet strength. In the shadows of Hollywood, where fame and ego often ruled, there were whispers. Some people said he was using grief to appear noble. Others felt overshadowed by his simplicity. Jealousy began to stir. They did not know that Keanu's heart carried wounds too deep for performance. They did not understand that this was not about attention, it was about survival, about keeping Robin's flame alive. Yet the real twist of that night was still unseen. Among the crowd, an old friend of Robin had been watching silently, his eyes sharp, his heart heavy. He would later approach Keanu with a secret that would change everything, a truth about Robin that had been hidden from the public. It was a truth that would test Keanu's humility, his resilience, and his commitment to kindness. In a way he had never faced before, the story of Robin and Keanu was not about to end with grief. It was only beginning, and the world would soon discover how to live one gone. One still standing could together inspire humanity in a way no script, no stage, and no screen ever could. The night after the charity event, Keanu sat alone, in his apartment once again. The city outside was noisy, filled with cars, horns, and endless chatter, but inside it was quiet. He replayed Robin's words in his mind. The late-night call years ago, the kindness that had come at a time when he could barely breathe. Grief often returned to him like waves, crashing hard, pulling him under. But this time the pain felt different. It was not only his own, it was the collective weight of millions who loved Robin. He looked at the little boy's smile from earlier that evening, the way his eyes had lit up when Keanu spoke to him. That moment reminded him of Robin's unique gift, lifting others, even when his own heart was heavy. Keanu whispered to himself, "This is what I must carry." Yet he also felt uneasy. He had noticed the whispers, the eyes of certain people in the crowd. Not everyone wanted this kind of humility to stand out in Hollywood. In a world where image was everything, true kindness sometimes felt like a threat. The next morning, while drinking coffee in a small corner cafe, a man approached him. He was older, with tired eyes but a steady presence. He introduced himself as Daniel, a longtime friend of Robin. Keanu recognized him from a distance at the event, but hadn't spoken to him. Daniel sat down slowly, his voice low, as though what he carried couldn't be spoken out loud in front of the world. "Robin always trusted you," Daniel said. "He spoke about you once, how you were gentle in a world that demanded toughness. I think you should know something most people will never hear." Keanu's eyes narrowed with curiosity and caution. Daniel continued, "Robin didn't just fight sadness. He carried the pain of others in silence. He used to say that if he could absorb someone's darkness, maybe they could walk lighter, but no one knew the cost it took from him." He paused, his voice trembling. Before he passed, he left behind a letter. It wasn't a goodbye, it was a request. He wanted his friends to continue lifting others, not through fame, but through quiet acts. He feared the world would forget the true power of simple kindness. Keanu felt a chill. He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "And why tell me?" Daniel looked at him deeply. "Because you are already doing it. The boy last night, the words you spoke, Robin would have wanted that. But there is more." The letter mentions people he had been quietly helping. Some of them are lost now, struggling without his presence. Someone needs to continue what he started. The weight of Daniel's words pressed down on Keanu. He had always lived quietly, avoiding the noise of Hollywood. But this was different. It wasn't about charity events or cameras. It was about carrying a legacy of unseen kindness. But as this conversation unfolded, outside the cafe, a reporter had been watching. She snapped a few photos of the two men speaking. Her curiosity sharpened in her world. Stories sold when they carried drama, not when they carried truth. Within hours, headlines began to form, suggesting that Keanu was claiming Robin's memory for himself. Whispers turned to voices, and voices turned to questions. Later that evening, Keanu's phone buzzed with messages from his manager. "They are twisting the story. Keanu, people think you're trying to make this about you. We need to release a statement, control the damage." But Keanu only shook his head. "If I explain, it will become more noise. Robin didn't care for headlines. Neither will I. Truth will live in actions, not words." Still, the storm grew louder. Social media filled with debates. Some defended him, sharing stories of his humility over the years. Others doubted him, saying he was using grief for sympathy. It was painful to see the world misunderstanding him, but it was a test he silently accepted. Days passed, and Daniel returned to meet him again. He brought a folded piece of paper. Worn and creased, the letter Robin had left behind. Keanu opened it slowly, his hands trembling. The handwriting was messy but warm, just like Robin himself. The words were short but powerful. "If laughter was my gift to the world, then kindness must be yours. Carry it quietly, for the ones who cannot speak. Find them, stand with them, lift them. The world will never see, but they will never forget." Keanu closed his eyes. The letter pressed against his chest. He knew then that his path was no longer just his own. It was tied to Robin's voice, to the invisible thread of kindness that connected them both. But the journey would not be easy. The more he tried to follow this path, the more obstacles would arise. Jealousy, misunderstanding, and the harshness of fame would test him. Yet, in those challenges, the light of Robin's memory would guide him forward. What Keanu didn't know was that one of the first people he would help, in honor of Robin's legacy, would change his life forever. The city was restless with rumors, but Keanu chose silence. Instead of fighting the noise, he began to walk quietly into the shadows where Robin's letter pointed him. Daniel had given him a list of names people Robin had helped in secret. Most were strangers to the world but carried pain that once touched Robin's heart. Among them was a young woman named Claire. Claire was in her 20s, living in a small, crumbling apartment on the edge of the city. Once, she had dreamed of being a theater actress, but tragedy had pulled her dreams apart. She had lost her father to illness, her mother to despair, and her own spirit to the weight of survival. Robin had once met her at a support group for struggling artists. He had paid her rent for 3 months in silence, never allowing her to know it was him, only leaving envelopes with simple words, "Keep going." After Robin's passing, Claire's life had grown darker. Her work hours were long, her hope nearly gone. She often sat by the window at night, whispering to herself, maybe kindness only lives in stories. One evening, as rain poured over the city, she returned home to find a small envelope slipped under her door. Inside was not money, but a note written in gentle handwriting. "Robin believed in you. So do I. Do not let the light fade." There was no signature. Claire froze. Her hands trembled as she read it again and again. Who could have known Robin's words to her? Her eyes filled with tears, but for the first time in months, they were not only of sorrow, they carried a fragile spark of hope. Outside, in the shadows of the streetlight, Keanu watched her through the rain. He didn't want her to know it was him. This was not about his name, his face, or his fame. It was about keeping Robin's unseen kindness alive. As he turned to leave, his steps quiet, he whispered, "You're not alone, Claire." But the world, as always, was watching. A young paparazzi, eager for a story, had followed Keanu that night. He snapped blurry photos of him slipping the envelope. By the next morning, tabloids screamed with headlines, twisting the act into something sensational. Keanu Reeves caught sneaking in a woman's apartment late at night. The news spread like fire. Claire's phone buzzed endlessly. Her coworkers whispered behind her back. Strangers stared at her on the bus, and her fragile hope once again began to collapse under the weight of judgment. She sat on her bed, holding the note close, wondering if this kindness was now going to destroy her instead of heal her. When Keanu heard about the headlines, his heart sank. His intention had been pure, but the world's noise had poisoned it. He went to see Claire not as an actor, not as a star, but as a human being. He knocked gently on her door. When she opened it, her eyes were red from crying. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why would you do this when it only brings trouble?" Keanu looked at her with steady eyes. "Because Robin helped you once. Because you matter. Because kindness doesn't ask if the world will approve, it simply does what is right." Claire stared at him in silence, then broke down. She sobbed into her hands, and Keanu sat quietly beside her, not speaking, not trying to fix everything, just being there. Sometimes presence was the greatest kindness of all. As the days passed, Claire began to slowly rise again. She went back to rehearsing in her small room, reciting lines in front of a cracked mirror. Her voice, though shaky, grew stronger. She realized that perhaps kindness was not meant to erase pain, but to remind her she wasn't carrying it alone. But while Claire was healing, the storm outside grew worse. Hollywood voices, fueled by envy, painted Keanu as someone seeking attention through charity. "If he wants to help, why let it be seen?" they asked. "This is just another performance." Daniel warned him. "They are trying to break you. Keanu, this path won't be easy." Keanu only smiled faintly. Robin carried the world's laughter while drowning inside. "I can carry some misunderstanding if it means someone out there feels less alone." Yet, fate was preparing another test, one far heavier than rumors. A tragedy was about to unfold that would not only challenge Keanu's strength, but would also reveal the true depth of Robin's legacy. It would bring together lives in a way no one could predict, and it would show the world that kindness, even when misunderstood, carries the power to change destinies. Claire's fragile hope was beginning to grow again, but fate has a way of testing hearts that are only starting to heal. One cold evening, she was on her way home from rehearsal when the accident happened. A car, speeding down the wet road, lost control and struck a man who was crossing the street. Claire froze, her hands trembling, her breath caught. The man lay on the ground, blood staining the pavement, people shouting, horns blaring. And then, in the chaos, she saw Keanu. He had been nearby, quietly visiting another name on Robin's list. Without hesitation, he rushed forward. He knelt beside the injured man, his hands pressing gently to stop the bleeding, his voice calm even as panic surrounded them. "Stay with me," he whispered, his steady tone cutting through the noise. "Help is coming. You are not alone." Claire's heart pounded as she recognized the strength in his face. It wasn't the strength of a star or a hero on a screen, it was the raw, human strength of someone who refused to let another soul slip away without comfort. Paramedics arrived, and Keanu stayed until the man was lifted onto the stretcher. Only when the ambulance pulled away did he stand. His hands were stained with blood, his clothes damp with rain, but his eyes carried the same calm light. The next morning, the story exploded everywhere. This time, the photos were clear. Headlines shouted about Keanu Reeves saving a man's life, but the noise returned too, louder than before. Some praised him as a hero, but others, driven by envy, accused him again of staging the moment, of being where the cameras were on purpose. For Keanu, the pain wasn't in the rumors, it was in learning that the injured man had been someone deeply tied to Robin's past. Daniel came rushing to him with the news. "That man you saved, his name is Peter. Years ago, Robin helped him through addiction." Robin once said Peter was one of the few who reminded him what resilience looked like. Keanu's heart sank. "So Robin was still guiding me," he whispered. "Even now." Peter was in critical condition, fighting for his life in the hospital. Keanu visited quietly, bringing no cameras, no press. He sat by the bedside, watching the weak rise and fall of Peter's chest. Claire joined him one evening, carrying a small flower she had bought with the little money she had. Together, they sat in silence. Two souls who had been touched by Robin in different ways, now bound together by kindness. But while they sat in that quiet room, outside forces grew restless. Hollywood insiders and gossip channels were spinning wild stories, suggesting that Keanu was building some kind of legacy cult around Robin's name. It was cruel, it was false, but it spread like wildfire. Daniel begged him, "Say something, defend yourself before they destroy you." But Keanu shook his head. Robin never fought rumors with words, he fought them by living the truth. "I will do the same." And then, one night, as Claire sat beside him in the hospital, Peter woke. His eyes opened weakly, and his cracked voice whispered, "Robin used to sit right here. Years ago, he told me laughter would save me. And now, you sit here." "Keanu, why?" Keanu leaned closer, his voice soft. "Because kindness doesn't die with the person who carried it. It lives on in those who choose to keep it alive." Tears welled in Peter's eyes, and though his body was weak, his spirit seemed to rise. That moment, unseen by cameras, carried a power greater than any headline. Claire felt it too. She realized that Robin's legacy wasn't about fame or recognition, it was about these unseen moments. The invisible threads that connected broken lives to kindness that kept them alive. But the storm was not over. As Peter began to recover, powerful voices in Hollywood began plotting against Keanu. Jealousy had now hardened into something darker. They wanted to silence his quiet influence, to make the world doubt him completely. And the cruel twist was, their attack would not come directly at Keanu. It would strike at Claire, the very person he had tried to protect, dragging her into a scandal that threatened to destroy her fragile chance at a new life. The first attack came quietly, like a whisper that turned into a storm. Claire had just finished a small rehearsal at a local theater when she saw her phone buzzing with dozens of messages. Her name was on headlines now, not because of her talent, but because of lies. That young woman secretly linked to Keanu Reeves exposed by insiders. She using Robin Williams' name to climb into Hollywood? The stories twisted her life into something ugly. They painted her as a desperate actress who had manipulated Keanu, who had pretended to be broken just to gain sympathy. Cruel voices on social media filled her notifications, strangers judging her without knowing the truth. Claire's heart shattered. She sat in the corner of the empty theater, shaking as she scrolled through the comments. The very hope Keanu had helped her rebuild now felt like it was being ripped apart. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Maybe I was wrong. Maybe kindness doesn't survive in this world." When Keanu heard what was happening, he rushed to see her. He found her sitting on the stage, her head buried in her hands, broken by the weight of a storm she hadn't created. He walked slowly to her side, his voice steady. "Claire," he said softly, "look at me." She lifted her face, her eyes swollen with tears. "They're destroying me, Keanu. They're saying things that aren't true. I don't have the strength to fight them." Keanu knelt in front of her, his eyes calm and full of quiet strength. "You don't have to fight them. That's what they want to pull you into noise. But you have something stronger than their words. You have truth, and truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to endure." She shook her head, sobbing, "But I'm not strong like you." Keanu's voice grew softer. "I'm not strong either. I've been broken more times than I can count. But someone once reminded me that even broken people can carry light. And that is what you are doing, Claire. They can't take that away from you." Those words settled in her heart. Though the storm outside grew louder, something inside her began to steady. She wasn't alone, not anymore, but the attacks didn't stop. Tabloids released fake stories, photos were twisted, and her small theater role was suddenly canceled because producers feared bad publicity. Claire sat in her room, devastated once again, whispering, "Why is kindness always punished?" Keanu refused to let her sink. Instead of hiding, he decided to do something unexpected. He arranged for Claire to perform a short piece at a local charity stage, the same event where Robin's memory had once been honored. There would be no cameras, no press releases, just people, just hearts. That when the night came, Claire stood backstage trembling. "What if they boo me? What if they only see the lies?" she asked. Keanu placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then, let them, because truth isn't about winning applause. It's about giving your heart, even when the world tries to close it." She stepped onto the small stage, her hands shaking. The crowd was modest, not filled with flashing lights or famous names, and yet, as she began to perform, her voice wavered at first but slowly grew steady. The pain in her life poured out into her lines, her gestures, her tears. People in the audience leaned forward, drawn not by perfection, but by authenticity. But when she finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then, gentle applause rose, growing louder, not because she was flawless, but because she was real. Claire looked out into the crowd and saw Keanu smiling softly. After the event, an older woman approached her. With tears in her eyes, she said, "Your performance reminded me of Robin. He once told me laughter and pain live together. Tonight you showed me both. Thank you." Claire broke down in quiet tears, not from shame this time, but from the feeling of being seen not as a scandal, not as a victim, but as a human being with a voice. Keanu stood nearby, watching silently. He knew this was what Robin had meant in his letter, carrying kindness forward not through grand acts, but through moments that touched unseen lives. But Hollywood's cruelty was not done. As Claire began to heal again, another blow was about to fall, this time targeting Keanu himself. Powerful voices, driven by jealousy, were planning to expose painful chapters of his past to silence him forever. The storm was far from over. It was only becoming darker. The storm that had been building finally broke. One morning, Keanu woke. Two headlines that cut deep into his heart. Tabloids were digging into his past, his losses, his grief, his scars. They published stories about the death of his daughter, about the tragedy of losing his partner, about the lonely years he had spent walking through life with pain hidden behind his quiet, smiled at the world that once praised him, now questioned him. Is his kindness only born from tragedy? Is his humility just a mask for sorrow? Voices shouted on television and across the internet, dissecting his life as if it were nothing more than entertainment. Keanu sat in silence, his hands folded, his eyes steady. Daniel stormed into the room, furious. This is cruelty, Keanu. They are tearing you apart. You must defend yourself. But Keanu shook his head. No, this is my truth. Pain is part of my story. If the world wants to see it, then let them. Maybe they will understand that kindness isn't born from perfection, it's born from wounds. Later that week, a memorial event for Robin was organized again, a larger one this time, with the world watching. Keanu was invited to speak. Some expected him to remain silent, others thought he would finally defend himself. But when he stepped onto the stage, his presence was calm, his voice low but unwavering. The world knows my pain now, he began. They write about it as if it is entertainment. But pain is not something to sell. Pain is something we carry. It shapes us, it bends us, but it does not have to break us. Robin carried pain too, more than most will ever know. Yet he gave us laughter, he gave us light. That is what true strength looks like. The audience sat in silence, every word sinking deep. Keanu continued, people ask me why I try to be kind. The truth is simple, because I know what it feels like to be broken. And when you know that feeling, you never want another soul to feel it alone. Then, instead of speaking more, Keanu did something unexpected again. He invited Claire to the stage. She looked nervous, trembling under the weight of so many eyes. But Keanu whispered to her, speak from your truth. That is enough. With shaking hands, Claire stepped forward. I was once someone who thought kindness was a lie, she said softly. But Robin helped me when I didn't even know it was him. And when he was gone, Keanu carried that kindness to me. It saved me. Not with money, not with fame, but with presence, with words, with belief. If you doubt him, doubt me too. Because without him, I wouldn't be standing here today. Her words cracked open the hearts of everyone listening. The applause that followed was not the loud cheer of entertainment, but the raw sound of human gratitude. People wept openly, remembering their own moments of despair, their own need for kindness. The storm of rumors did not end overnight, but something changed. The noise of cruelty was met with the louder truth of lived kindness. People began sharing their own stories of how Robin had touched their lives, and how Keanu's quiet acts of humanity had inspired them. The focus shifted from scandal to something deeper, the idea that kindness, even when misunderstood, carries power. Weeks later, Peter, the man Keanu had saved, finally left the hospital. His steps were weak, but his spirit was stronger than ever. He walked with Claire and Keanu down a quiet street, laughing softly, a sound that felt like healing. Daniel, watching them, said quietly, Robin would be proud, not because of the fame, not because of the words, but because you chose to carry the weight when it was heavy. Keanu looked at the sky, the fading light painting it gold, and whispered, we carry him together. In that moment, the story of Robin and Keanu was not about one man saving another. It was about broken souls lifting each other, about kindness passing from one heart to another, unseen but unshakable. And so, in a world often filled with noise, cruelty, and shadows, the quiet flame of kindness continued to burn, carried by those who chose to live it, no matter the cost.